got a full lineup tonight. So this is a series of brief talks covering either new developments, practical topics, or thought-provoking ideas in systems engineering. That was the premise of what the talks were supposed to be about. And so I want to get right into the first talk here, and that's going to be a talk provided by Dave Fadley. It's called Risk Simply. Dave's an ESEP with the Chesapeake chapter, has 35 years of engineering and project management experience with the US DoD. So we're going to hear Dave's thoughts on risk management.
Hi, my name is Dave Fadley, and I'm here to share a little bit with you what I found on risk and how to make it practical on the job, and I call it Risk Simply. This comes from a presentation I put together a number of years ago, what I used from some of my clients, the customers over in the federal government, over in the DoD Intel community, because I found there was a problem that people really weren't describing risk very well. Typically, you walk into a meeting, people showing risk, I talk about risk, they use 1 or 2 word descriptions. Things like, what's your risk schedule? What's your risk personnel, budget, people have left, those kind of really sort, and people like all nod their heads, smile like, yeah, okay, but they really don't understand, well, what does that mean? What happened? What caused that? What's the uncertainty? What happens if those things actually do happen? What's the impact to my objectives? Things like that. Those are never talked about, and and then they wonder why things aren't effectively happening. So I put this together to try to help educate things I'd learned over the years. I hope you will too. Hope this is helpful. So the topics I want to talk about are the difference between a risk and an issue. They aren't the same. How to clearly identify and break down risks so that they're very clear. I'll give some worksheets as a way to do that, to make it helpful, very practical, working on a project as well. I'll give some examples and then share some references at the end. So what is risk? So fundamentally, it's uncertainty and it's something that matters. It's really important. It affects something that's important. For example, it can affect the program or the project objectives, whether it's cost or schedule or technical. And you can put a probability of it happening. That's the uncertainty part. The impact is, what is the impact of those objectives we talked about for your project? And the other aspect is you have to keep and realize that risk has not happened yet. Something could possibly happen. The difference between that as an issue is something has happened. So if a risk happens, it's now an issue and you got to deal with it. For example, 3 people left, 4 people going on vacation. You got to deal with it. That's an issue. Or there's a dependency that they're not delivering. They haven't delivered yet. It's not that they may not deliver. If they haven't, they've missed their deadline. That's an issue that happened. You got to deal with that now. So that's the difference. The other point I want to mention is there's threats and opportunities. There's good and bad risk. Most people just focus on the bad, of what the threats are and how they're going to handle that. But there's also opportunities that you can exploit to make things better, to enhance, to save money, maybe save time, those kind of things. So you want to address both, and I'll give examples of that as well. So risk. Rather than using 1 or 2 word descriptions, which you may use when you are actually presenting on a PowerPoint slide, and I'll talk about that later, but you want to have a further explanation ready in there and very clearly understood. And you want to break it down, and this is what I saw from 3 parts. To break it down to 3 parts is what I use and what I found in other seminars and other people. And it's broken down to the actual cause, the actual risk, the actual effect, or in other words, what the fact is that caused it, what the uncertainty, the unknown is, and what's the impact. So it's really given, if, then. So think of risk identification as breaking down to given, if, then statements. I think it was Dr. David Hilson, called the Risk Doctor, a number of years ago, a seminar I took at PMI, created stuff called meta-language, just another way of thinking about breaking it down in these 3 parts. And his take is it's a structured description of a risk, which separates that cause, risk, and effect. So you can break it down into, given being a result of, or because of an existing condition or cause, the if being something that's uncertain, it may occur, which would lead to something. Third part, then, and objectives. And the keywords on the bottom, you can see that you would use for those three parts. So if that's helpful, sometimes it is. When you're beginning, it's a good way to think about it. So the worksheet is basically like an Excel spreadsheet you can use to break it down. You can always actually have something in the far left saying, you know, what you say on a PowerPoint slide to management, you know, schedule, personnel, whatever. If you can't fit all this on there, use a very short description, and then have for example, a backup sheet or a spreadsheet or a PowerPoint slide that, you know, it goes into more detail like this. It breaks it down to give and if then statements like we talked about. You can write them down here and break them down, but also include the risk response. And the risk response, there's two different types, right? There's for threats and opportunities. For threats, what are the 4 foundational responses? You can avoid it, avoid the risk. You can accept it, just let it happen. You can mitigate, which is typically done, which is how to reduce it. Or you can transfer it to somebody else or many other people, right, to get rid of it. But on the flip side, on good risk, there's opportunities. In parallel to those 4, you can exploit it, you can take it, you can use it, you can just accept it, let it happen, you can enhance it, make it better, and you can share the goodness with others as well. So those are all risk responses you want to consider when you're doing this, not just mitigate all the time, which is what most people do. And the easy way to remember this, the way I remember it, is use that acronym GET or DONE, GITR, for give and if then, risk response. Here is a typical like acquisition review board or quarterly program review risk slide. I think came out of standard like DoD type manuals, you know, otherwise known as the stoplight chart, the red, green, yellow, where you multiply the impacts and the probability on the horizontal and vertical axis. The risk will show up in one of those areas, and you really focus on the stuff that's in the red, which is high. That's what those are typically used for, right? So when you do that, they have like the little columns in a row that's in the middle of the left there, and you're given if then risk statement. You can fit under the risk, or you have to use the 1 or 2 word description, and then the backup the given if then. But I would try to get the given if then in there. And where it says mitigation column, it really should be risk response, because mitigation is just one of the responses, depending on what it is. So relabel that as, you want to change that to it says risk response. And the lower left is, and you can't read on your screen, but there's a DoD risk management guide, has some really good guidelines on how you want to use those numbers 1 through 5 and under what conditions it would fit in there. So that's how these given if then statements, et cetera, would fit and modify into a typical stoplight chart for risk, like it's shown here. So example of a program risk sheet. So here are examples I made up a number of years ago, and the description contains your given if then. Your far right, it says strategy. Well, that's really your risk response, right? And there's numbers you multiply in between to find a priority score, which you're going to work on first. This tends to be a fancy one. But you notice every description here has a given if then all there, and you see how it can take up some room with the strategy or the risk response on the right-hand side. And every one of those are mitigated except the last one. Look at the last one it's actually an opportunity. And it says, given the recent earthquake, if the site's network or internet communications channel are delayed, then the system may be able to implement lower priority features with the extra time. So you could potentially exploit that. You know, if that happens and it delays things, and you can get other work done while it's being worked on, that's a good thing, right? You can take advantage of that. So that's an example of something that you would want to exploit. And with that, I did a number of references that I used. I think I learned a lot of the stuff at David Hilson's class down there in the 4th one. But you can see PMI has done a chapter in their body of knowledge. The INCOSE handbook has a process. Actually, PMI has a standard practice standard for risk management as well. DoD risk management guide is listed there. Risk Nav is a tool that people have used over the years as well. So I hope this has been helpful, and I hope you can use it and apply it on your job. Thanks. Bye.
Awesome. Thank you, Dave. Actually, Dave is here tonight, as well as our other speakers. I forgot to mention that they all were able to make it tonight. So we have the experts you can ask directly any questions. I forgot to mention how we're going to roll with this is I'm going to intersperse these talks with about 5 minutes. I'm going to stick with 5 minutes between the talk for questions. And then afterwards, we'll have a longer period of discussion. But we want to sort of get through the videos, have some brief feedback, and then move on. And then at the end, after the door prize is offered, we can stick around and talk all night. All right, so anybody have any thoughts on risk they want to share? Is risk under or over emphasized thing where you're at? Or anybody? Oh, feel free to unmute yourself and just talk out if you want.
Kaz here, Dave.
Hey, guys.
So I guess I had a question about some of the risk numbers. A couple of years ago, when I was with another company, we had a presentation, and this, again, a person was apparently very intimate with risk and talked about the risk modeling and the process you go through and all this fun stuff. And I thought, well, that sounds pretty interesting. He showed up some matrix and said they had some numbers on here. And typically, you know, he was a, you know, DOD type. Then I asked him about the numbers, and he was like, almost like super, I mean, this is all employees at the same company. But you thought I'd asked them what the, you know, the password was to get into Fort Knox. And I wondered if some of your experience has been that way, that these are like highly protected numbers or values that because one company's experience with determining those risk values, you know, in other words, a probability of an event occurring type of thing, is that, you know, very closely held, or is it just this particular person was being very shy about it?
Yeah, I know my personal experience, it hasn't been that closely held. I mean, I've been, I guess it depends on the culture you're in. I mean, I've heard people who said, no matter what happens, we're never going to have red risks, right? Yeah. And that's because they're trying to reflect. And this is a government client that has to go to their management, right? But as a contractor, as an advisor, consultant, we don't say that, right? We say, here's what we think it is. What you do with this information is up to you. How you present it's going to be up to you. Yeah. But we're going to tell the truth, right? We're going to be truth sayers on this regardless. So
sure, you give them, you know, be frank about it. Part of it too is, you know, if you're in a company or a contractor, you can say, okay, here's a really high risk, and here's what we can help you do to mitigate it. And I'm certain, you know, that's part of that as well. But I guess I was, you know, just thinking that, well, maybe these risk numbers, I figured if it was for a contract, they're owned by the government. So if somebody else within, you know, the department, group, division, whatever, could see that as well. They might be, you know, working for another company. It might be another government person. I don't know, but I think, well, these are, you know, I was paid by the government to provide these numbers. You know, like, well, you know, again, it just seemed a little strange that it would be that protected. But, you know, and the other thing too is lessons learned. In other words, you know, they give you, well, I mean, for like something like a disk drive, they say mean time in between failures, like, you know, 1,000,000 hours or something like that. Well, what happens when we find out it's like 30,000 or something like that? Well, okay, well, now we're finding out this particular vendor and that model or something was having issues, and then we need to adjust accordingly.
Yeah. I mean, I'd seen people use this very, very well, but I saw enough, at least over in a most recent clients the last 10 years, that again would kind of give it cursory glances, you know, the one-word answers to what stuff is. So executives nodding their head like, yep, I understand everything you're talking about, and then they have no clue really what this stuff really means. So, yeah.
Dave, this is Jeff Burlett. I have a question. Wanted to get your view, and I think maybe this is becoming a bigger issue as we go into artificial intelligence type systems that are built into many of the large systems of systems. Risks are typically identified based on experience, right, and based on models and you know, engineering practices that have existed for a long time and are well understood. But AI really throws that into chaos, right? AI can redesign code on the fly. It can decide to route data in a different way or connect systems differently. How are those risks being identified and addressed because they're so away from the typical?
Well, you know, Jeff, my thought would be, for example, it's off the top of my head, If you still use a given if then kind of, construct, using that, and that's not the only one you can use, but it would say, given the fact that AI does things on the fly, for example, if answers come out that we've never seen before, we may have some outcomes that we don't know what, right, may be bad or good. And so then at least what that does, at least it brings it out that people say, we got to do something about this. We're not sure what we're going to do. Maybe we need to have people get together on the side and go figure out what that is. But at least it identifies the issue, right? It identifies the risk, and they got to do something about it, right? Because we don't have all the answers, right? But at least as a system engineer, it identifies it, puts it out front that we need to do something about that. And that's versus, doing this, right? Don't even look at it.
Okay. Let me cut in here. Let's say if more people got some questions, let's save them for the end. We're going to jump into our next video. Make sure you write down your questions to get back to Dave. We'll also have breakout rooms available at the end if people want to get together and talk specifically about one thing with maybe the presenter or whoever. They can do that, or we can just all discuss together. So we're going to move on to our second video. And this video is titled Cultural Influences on Systems Engineering, and it's by Ahmad Al-Sudari. Ahmad is currently working on his PhD in aerospace engineering at the University, what was it? Sorry, Ahmad. It was, darn, I did it. Putra, Malaysia. And Ahmad's currently working that, I think, in Saudi Arabia. Let's start Ahmad's video there, Paul.
Assalamu alaikum. Good evening, everyone, or good morning here from Saudi Arabia. First, I would like to thank INCOSE Chesapeake chapter and Mr. Clinton Hilliard for giving me this chance for making this presentation. My name is Ahmed Al-Sudari from Saudi Arabia, 1 year only in my CSEP. My presentation today is about cultural influences on systems engineering. It will summarize some literature review about this topic during my ongoing PhD. The main question which I'm trying to answer in this presentation is systems engineering applicable in all cultures, and how can we tailor systems engineering to fit a certain culture? What are the boundaries of systems engineering? Because it overlaps with many fields in management and science and social skills. So on the larger border of systems engineering, it will definitely be influenced and overlapping with culture. Culture is a very big term which includes several elements which encompass human societies together. There are some elements which are in the central core of the culture, like beliefs. There are all other elements which are in the boundaries of culture, like arts or customs. Because of the influence on systems engineering originals, Western culture is anything originated or associated with Europe. So it includes Eastern Europe and Western Europe, because all of them are originated from similar industrial routes, encompass them together. For comparing cultures, Hofstede scale regularly used. Great Hofstede started this scale by making a survey from different locations of IBM between 1967 and 1973. It has 6. INCOSE Systems Engineering Handbook utilizes Western and mainly American historical approach, as visible in section 2.7, which described the evolution of systems engineering to be started from 1930s. However, we can follow the roots and find the deep cultural elements of systems engineering there. Also, we can find the deep cultural effects on the Chinese version of systems engineering. There are a rich literature comparing the Western and Chinese systems engineering. For example, this article tried to compare the systems thinking. This is another article comparing the manned space flight programs between United States and China, and it uses Hofstede culture scale for this conversion. Dr. Timothy Ferris is a main contributor in the subject of effect of culture on systems engineering. In his first article, The Interplay of Modernism, Postmodernism, and Systems Engineering, he explained the history of modernity, how it affects the colonization and the thoughts of superiority of European thoughts, as McCallow's opinion that a single shelf of any European library is worth more than all of the literature of India. And the feeling that the European people were primitive. Also, one aspect of modernism is the philosophy that nobody has ever seen a stone breaking a window, as Ayer said. During the quantum mechanics, relativity, and World War I, this ideas of modernism was challenged. This led to the philosophy of postmodernism. Postmodernism led to more individuality of people. So in terms of systems engineering, the modernism theories was leading to mass production. On the other hand, the postmodernism theories was leading to the mass customization. This was tackled in this article. Another article is System Engineering Process Standardization and Cultural Diversity. He explained how the United States, the theories on the systems engineering is the contribution toward project success, which was supported from the Calvinist and Armenian theological positions from Christian theology. Whereas in the Taiwanese philosophy, because of the Confucian effect, the most important thing is a relationship between people. And also, sometimes the management decision is above everybody. Applying any systems engineering from one standard will not directly fit in the Taiwanese culture. Another important article is about ISO 15288, how it was different from different cultures. So it would depend on cultural dimensions. How, for example, how instruction is given? Is it by command or by specific action or by command? The manner which people normally work together, is it collegial or master-servant manner? The attitude to availability of information, is the information shared or closely guarded? How is the communication? Is it specific or detailed, or open and general? So among different culture, there is a different interpretation. So the ISO standard cannot fit all of the cultures together. He elaborated that the derivative of the ISO 15288 standard is all large complex projects from United States, either from technological or computer domain, or also from military standards. Also, another aspect is the authors of ISO 15288. So I made a small effort by collecting all of the INCOSE System Engineering Handbook editors and reviewers who are SEPs. So I discovered that from the Excel sheet of the SEPs, that most of them is are from United States, and 3 from United Kingdom, 2 from Norway, and 4 from France. Dr. Tim supervised many contributors in the field. Maybe the most important one is Lawson, an examination of social systems of engineering projects. So my main point now is how to apply systems engineering for different culture. So if I am talking about my own culture, which is Saudi Arabian culture or Malaysian culture, where I'm doing my PhD, maybe we can follow the same approach of Chinese who thought about their roots. So our roots is Islamic perspective. Islam is a supplication. It's directed by the revelation from the God, Allah. The objective of Islam is justice and search of truth. So if I want to implement it to our actual culture, so there is a lot of risks and opportunities. However, I can derive something from the actual systems engineering practice, and also the Chinese and other cultures tailoring of systems engineering. Also, I can take a guidance from the previous implementation of science into Islamic culture, like the Golden Islamic Age. So one example of cultural implementation, the cultural implementation of Islamic ideas could be done in all systems engineering processes. So taking one as an example, like the decision management process, in Islam there are a lot of guidance toward this process specifically. So there are two ayah from Quran encouraging the people to consult, encouraging the management to consult people, which called in Arabic shura. And shura is not something, is not democracy, for example. No, it's something specific. And also another ayah is encouraging people to make to verify each news coming to them. So for the implementation of decision management process, there are Islamic interpretations, and some of them are very old and ancient and very powerful. Like Al-Mawardi scientist, he's an Islamic scholar in early in 1000. He passed away in 1058, and his book is Al-Ahkam al-Sultaniyya, the Ordinance of Government, contained a lot of guidance of how to do shura in Islam. Also, Ibn Taymiyyah have two books specific for management and economics reasons. Also, he have a lot of books on philosophies and how to deal with science. There are more than 15 books about with the name of Ashura and Shura of Islam, and this is two examples of new implementation, people trying to do new implementation on management or military theories, and they are talking about decision management in Islam. Also, there are technical interpretations. Some people trying to do a technical interpretation of Islam, like this researcher. They did interpretation about construction project leadership from perspective of Islam, and also similar lady who student by Dr. Tim Ferriss. She did about how millennial generation deal with the news, how they ensure the news is verified, and she derived that from the previous ayah which I explained. Also, there are another books which trying to map between the new management principles and the Islamic principles. So in my future work, I'm trying to build a methodology for tailoring systems engineering from Islamic perspective to fit my own culture. So I'm trying to follow it by model-based system engineering, and your encouragement and support is highly appreciated. Thank you, everybody. This was my presentation, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Ahmad. So that was interesting. I noticed when I don't know who all was at IS who's here, but like I noticed at IS there was quite a bit of, not quite a bit, but there was several talks given that dealt with cultural influences in systems engineering. I think even one of the keynotes addressed something like that, where they gave a presentation on implications on countering authoritarianism or something like that. Heavily, obviously, involves understanding culture and how systems engineering would apply to that. Any other thoughts?
I have some comments.
Sure.
Shukran, first of all, that was a very interesting presentation. But if you were one of my students, let me tell you what I would have said. When you use the Islamic sources, Islamic culture, you used many sources, but when you discussed Western culture, you used a single source. Mm-hmm. Now, did you notice that in your source, you showed Tim Ferriss as a senior lecturer? Now, Tim Ferriss has been a senior lecturer for 25 years and has not advanced above into the professor grades. Now, that could be for many reasons, but if you're going to use a source who has not moved up the academic ladder, you need to find out why. Because it could deal with credibility, it could deal with many other reasons. And I knew Tim when he was at the University of South Australia. And by the way, did you know that Confucius, you mentioned Chinese, Confucius was a systems engineer? Uh-huh. I visited his hometown, and the description of what he was doing in all the areas there show that he was actually a really good systems engineer.
Was he certified?
By many people, but not by INCOSE-CC.
Oh, okay. That's what I meant by INCOSE-CC, yeah.
Well, see, in British English, when you say somebody is certified, it means they've been committed for certain reasons.
Right, right.
Yeah, actually, that's still a phrase we use here in the United States. Yeah.
And the other point about Islam is that historically, the Islamic culture was very rich and contributed an awful lot to knowledge, while Western medieval culture was in the Dark Ages. You could have mentioned that point as well. But it was really a good presentation.
Yeah, it's very well done. Yes.
Yeah. Hey, Ahmad.
Thank you, Joseph, for your comments.
Yeah. Hey, Ahmad, just a real quick. So, and I'm not that familiar with the Islamic culture other than what I read occasionally, but in a real practical sense, you highlighted the decision management. Could you give a real simple example of Western versus Islamic in a decision, how that would look? I mean, what would be fundamentally different if you're going through a decision process?
Actually, this is a very tough question. Maybe inside the presentation, I try to elaborate that the core of the Western culture itself was the theology and the translation of Arabic literature during 15th and 16th century was leading so much into the Renaissance. So what I'm trying to say that Islamic culture was coming after Greek culture. Greek culture was thinking about regular philosophy without experimentation. So Islamic scholars like Ibn Haytham invited the experimentation and I don't know the translation, invited the experimentation methods. But the experimentation methods combined with the theology. So I do the experiment, but there is some part of the experiment is known only by Allah. This is my limitation in the experiment. During the Renaissance, the scholars like Galileo, Descartes, they believed in the mechanical philosophy. They removed the theology from the point. But the experimentation method is still applicable. They only move the theology. I don't know if you get my point.
Well, we can talk afterwards, I guess, after it's all over. I'm running out of time.
Yeah. Let's move on a bit. I want to keep on schedule, but like I said, we'll have plenty of time afterwards. So our next speaker is Mr. Mike Pafford. He's been an ESEP with the chapter for a long time and actually a past president. And Mike is going to talk on a systems engineering soft skill called facilitation, a valuable SE soft skill.
Hello, thanks for watching and listening to this mini talk on an important systems engineering soft skill, facilitation. The following slides will give you information on how to get specific facilitation information as it applies to systems engineering roles and responsibilities. This information will help you develop, maintain, refine, or improve your systems engineering facilitation skills. Besides these opening remarks, I'll give you links to facilitation information in the INCOSE Competency Framework, the INCOSE Handbook 4th edition, and the Systems Engineering Body of Knowledge, or CBOK. I'll also give you links to 3 facilitation case studies, as well as links to a facilitation professional development organization, the International Association of Facilitators, or IAF. I'll finish with links to my contact information should you have any questions later. These links will be via URL and QR codes. Here's information about facilitation as described in the ongoing development of the newest INCOSE Competency Framework, free to INCOSE members in the INCOSE store. Facilitation is being included as an important professional competency. The URL and QR code you see here link to information on the INCOSE Competency Framework public website. More detailed information is available by logging into your INCOSE Connect account, then either visiting the INCOSE store, the INCOSE Connect Competency Working Group, or Soft Skills Working Group pages, or doing a Connect search using the keywords facilitate or facilitation. Here's information about facilitation as described in the INCOSE Handbook, 4th edition, hard copy paperback discounted, soft copy digital download free to INCOSE members in the INCOSE store. In Section 2 of the handbook, facilitation is listed as an important aspect of systems engineering leadership. That is, managing conflicts and facilitating healthy conflict around ideas and alternatives, and facilitating decision making. The URL and QR code you see here link to information on the INCOSE Handbook public website. Here's information about facilitation, as described in the latest version of the Systems Engineering Body of Knowledge, or CBOK, version 2.4. In the CBOK section on Value of Service Systems Engineering, that's compared with Product Systems Engineering and Enterprise Systems Engineering, facilitation is listed as an important interpersonal skill. These systems engineering interpersonal skills have also been referred to as soft skills. You can get more specific information on facilitation in the CBOK via the hyperlink or QR code shown here. Here's information about facilitation as I've applied it in 3 ways. In 2017, at the Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Laboratory, I facilitated a small project team of systems engineers and microgrid subject matter expert key stakeholders through specific initial project planning or IPP process steps in a series of 3 6-hour meetup sessions to begin their microgrid reference model-based systems engineering project. In 2018, again at the Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Laboratory, I facilitated another small project team of systems engineers and healthcare key stakeholders through IPP process steps, again in a series of 3 6-hour meetup sessions to help them start an ongoing Resilient Hospital Reference Model MBSE project. In 2020, I once more facilitated, this time online due to the COVID pandemic, another small team of systems engineers and critical infrastructure protection and recovery subject matter experts through the 3 phases in 3 3-hour sessions of an Earth-X critical infrastructure protection worldwide preparedness exercise. More specific information on these facilitation case studies is available via the online navigation steps shown here. INCOSE members can log into their INCOSE Connect account, click on the Working Groups menu item, click on the Object-Oriented Systems Engineering Method hyperlink, and then click on the Facilitation folder to get all the information on these 3 facilitation case studies. Here's information about a professional development organization for facilitation, the International Association of Facilitators, or IAF. Here also is a graphic illustrating the IAF 6 facilitation core competencies. They are: create collaborative client relationships, plan appropriate group processes, create and sustain a participatory environment, guide group to appropriate and useful outcomes, build and maintain professional knowledge, and model positive professional attitude. The URLs and QR codes you see here will guide you to more specific information on the IAF World Organization, as well as a PDF file detailing the 6 IAF facilitation core competencies. Thanks a lot for watching and listening to this mini talk on systems engineering facilitation. Here's some online addresses and QR codes that link to my contact information in case anyone has any other questions. Thanks again and good luck.
Awesome, Mike. You certainly provide a plethora of references there, actually. So that was a good presentation for if people are looking, what practically can I look to get some information on how to do facilitation. Mike, I think you were at one point, I don't know if you said it here or I certainly didn't say it, but I thought you were working to actually get yourself certified as a certified facilitator by that group. Is that right? Oh, your mic's muted. Yeah. Yep.
Yes, I'm working on that. And while I was working on it, I found that they've done the same thing that PMI and INCOSE has done. INCOSE was ACEP. PMI has a beginning type certification, also mostly test based. Well, now the IAF is also gone that route, and so there's a very much easier way through IAF.org there's a very much easier way for non-professional facilitators like ourselves and systems engineering and some other to actually join IAF, which gets you access to a library of methodology you wouldn't believe just by joining and paying your dues. And then it is I'm just going to call it a shallower ramp up towards certification that I don't think that any one of us would have any problem adding to our daily duties and so on, or off hours duties and so on and so forth to learn more about how. Well, actually, the first thing is that you'll discover how much and how far along toward IAF certification almost any systems engineer that's been in the business for a while, because we all know how often we are called on to do facilitation and facilitation type duties. So I can just say from my own experience, really pleasantly surprised at how far along toward a certification with another professional organization like this we all are. And I can't stress enough the value of the methodologies library that you would get by joining and paying dues in this particular organization. Of course, you can join the organization and pay dues without being certified.
That was really good, Mike. Hey, I really like the idea that you were able to do it with people and then online. That was fascinating to me. Did you find that the online had its limitations, or were you able to surmount them, or did they give you tips on how to work through that?
Yes, the biggest limitation that it's the same thing with the Zoom meetings that we all have. Zoom meetings is way better than nothing, but from teaching with the Johns Hopkins University and trying to do face-to-face facilitation, I can say that I can confirm anybody else saying how much value there is, instant value in body language and even the most minuscule real-time interaction face-to-face. A picture's worth 1,000 words type thing, but a real-time, even an almost instantaneous body language reaction or reaction in a face-to-face meeting, it really is. I'm not going to say it's a showstopper as far as going on to Zoom, but the productivity can almost be measured in the long term. That's one of the main things we're missing is real-time feedback through yes, I guess I'll just say real-time face-to-face feedback.
Yeah, I agree. When I'm teaching in a crowd, I can read the room, so to speak, where it's hard to read a room when it's just a bunch of squares. Yeah, you just don't get the same. Yeah, that's a very good point. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
Okay, this is Kaz. I just posted, Mike had given a workshop recently about the Lean Startup Method and the initial project planning. And I guess you used those three in that workshop, correct, Mike?
Oh yeah, those are the three cases that I do use, Kaz.
So I posted the link. It goes to the action report, but in there you can click on the tutorial or the workshop that went on for 3 hours, right? So, so it's a treasure trove there. I was unfortunate that you didn't mention it yourself in your own talk there, but I'm going to give you a plug here, and I really enjoyed the course. So
I almost did. On the slide, one of the slides says how you get through Connect into the Object-Oriented Systems Engineering Method Working Group and then the Facilitation folder. If you do that same thing off that slide, go into Connect, go into the USM Working Group, you'll see another folder which is called LSM and Agile for Initial Project Planning, and it's on the same level as the Facilitation folder, and you'll get everything that I've done since December 2015. Which is about 30 or 40 different times that I've given a talk or a tutorial or a presentation on the Lean Startup and Agile for Initial Project Planning. So that same slide, instead of going into the Facilitation folder, you can go into the LSM Agile for IPP folder, and there's all the stuff since 2015.
Excellent.
Okay, great.
And you're all welcome to it, of course.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, thanks, Kaz, for posting that. That was a good course. I was in that with you as well. All right, let's, well, I think we're right on schedule, actually. Let's move on to the next one. The final speaker tonight is Dr. Woodrow Winchester. He's local here. He's the Graduate Programs Director for University of Maryland, Baltimore County's College of Engineering right here in Maryland. So let's hear from Dr. Winchester.
Good evening. My name is Woodrow Winchester III, and I'm the Director of Professional Engineering Programs at UMBC. And I would like to spend a few minutes to discuss some findings as an outgrowth of some workforce scanning that we did at UMBC in support of uncovering the new regional frontiers for systems engineering growth and impact, thus going beyond the aerospace and defense industries. Not only is having a greater understanding of these new regional or emerging regional frontiers a benefit for us at UMBC, specifically from a programmatic development and responsiveness sort of perspective, but this exercise really aligns with the Systems Engineering Vision 2025, A World in Motion, our favorite document. I think that's been kind of quoted or cited quite a bit in a number of the presentations this year thus far, that speaks to expanding the applicability and recognition of systems engineering across a number of kind of dimensions, diverse application domains, enterprises from small to large, and breadth and scope of systems from individual systems to large scale sort of systems of systems. So as I stated, these findings were outcomes of program or programmatic review, and 3 industries or applicable application domains kind of stood out to us as having considerable programmatic and disciplinary growth from a systems engineering perspective. The first being agricultural technology, often abbreviated as ag tech or vertical farming. This is indoor farming that reflects the integration, actually very intimate sort of integration of technology and agriculture, and specifically emerging technologies such as sophisticated sensor technologies, artificial intelligence, machine learning. Within agriculture, these very sophisticated and oftentimes large scale systems of systems. So an exemplar organization regionally is Bowery Farming. They're located headquartered in New York, but have a farm here outside of Baltimore in Nottingham, Maryland. And matter of fact, I'm going to have some of their baby kale tonight. Aquaculture, or specifically land-based Atlantic salmon production. These sophisticated systems that are utilized in terms of producing salmon in land-based systems, very sophisticated architectures, sophisticated management systems and infrastructure to kind of support that. And an exemplar sort of organization regionally is Aquacon, planned facility on the Eastern Shore. Some issues right now in terms of permitting. I'm kind of following them quite a bit because they do have some connections from a research sort of perspective to UMBC, but I think they're overcoming those hurdles and have planned huge facility on the Eastern Shore. And what the pandemic has elucidated, public health as evidenced in, among many things, the challenges and breakdowns in vaccination logistics and IT infrastructure. So as mentioned, benefits of kind of expanding beyond aerospace and the defense industries are great. Especially as we see these industries kind of explode in growth, kind of pun intended. Bowery Farming specifically recently raised $300 million as concerns around food production and food security are growing in relevance and prominence. So these benefits, again, are great, span, disciplinary growth, provides diversification of context for growing systems engineering theory and methods, especially for us. And that was kind of the impetus for us in terms of this sort of exploration from an academic programming responsiveness sort of perspective, supporting programmatic differentiation, and also, workforce development as well. And also for us as INCOSE and systems engineering as a profession in practice, growing the awareness of systems engineering from the perspective of membership and programming sort of development. So some hows, meaning kind of how we can realize these sorts of benefits, some things that we can do now, some immediate sort of action items. And actually, we've already begun kind of conversations with Bowery Farming, for example. So some things that can be explored, facility plant tours in collaboration with INCOSE Chesapeake chapter and our academic partners, for instance. And I think it could be some really neat things in terms of that spurring and catalyzing K-12 STEM involvement as well. Development of systems engineering approaches and ag tech systems design, to ag tech systems design and management. So some scholarship sort of opportunities there. And then also from an academic programming perspective, collaborative development and contextualization of systems engineering education and training programs, in partnership with regional academic institutions. And to kind of bring some light to that and to kind of be a little bit provocative, and throw a vision out there. So, it's really interesting as I was kind of pulling together these slides and doing some additional sort of research in support of this talk, ran across this workforce initiative that was happening in terms of these Western, specifically in California growers, launching this Ag Tech X education initiative. So really, in essence, in terms of, cultivating or evolving the ag, workforce to be better equipped to work in these more technological sort of contexts. So I would offer, we could look at the kind of the flip or the reverse of that. So really kind of work at developing campaigns and initiatives that cultivate, systems engineering workforces or workforce, equipping them with the skills needed to navigate these new sort of agricultural sort of contexts. So I think there's lots of opportunities there, and I'm really excited about getting your questions, reactions, and feedback to this. And again, look forward to kind of engaging with you after all the talks conclude. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you.
Awesome. Yes. Expand systems engineering to everywhere. Any comments for Dr. Winchester?
Yeah, I got one. Hey, Woodrow, it's Dave Fadley. One thought would be in these new areas you're looking at, what system engineering competencies do you think are most important? Or, are they any different than aerospace and defense that'd be in these new areas?
Thanks, Dave, for the question. Yeah, I've got a bit of an audience here, and they were actually kind of responding to the question as well. I had to shush them down. But yeah, great point. Off the top of my head, what comes to mind, specifically architecture, I think tremendous opportunity in that regard. In terms of some of the work that we're doing around, it was interesting in terms of the last presentation around decision science, decision management, those sorts of skills and competencies and understandings. But again, just getting a better understanding of that industry and what those needs are, and beginning to kind of, collaborate and work with them in terms of building that sort of systems engineering awareness within those contexts. And there's much interest, much interest.
Yeah, Woodrow, this is Jeff Burlett. I have a question for you about the possibility that the government, federal government, will be spending tremendous investment dollars on an infrastructure plan to basically rebuild the U.S. infrastructure. And it includes, roads and highways, those are obvious, but also lots of the other, industries and domains that you covered. what would the U.S. government need to do from a systems engineering perspective to make that investment successful?
Hey, welcome guys. Hey, go in the other room. Thanks. Okay.
Okay. I thought I had a rowdy audience. Jeff, great question. You know, honestly, I don't know. That is a great question. And I think there's been thought around that. And of course, you know, it does align with infrastructure as it's been conceptualized. And specifically your question was around what would make it a success in terms of the investment or success to obtain investment in these?
No, I meant more in the execution phase. What would the government need to do to make sure that those investments are paid off in execution, and really around interoperability between, you know, agri-tech and health and transportation and, you know, all the areas where the government's planning to spend hundreds of billions of dollars?
Yeah, Jeff, I can't answer that question. That's a pretty big question, but it's an important question that needs to be, you know, posed and responded to. And I think there are folk that are kind of thinking about that. If not, they really do need to be thinking about that.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, I like Woodrow. You brought up some very local examples, and these examples are like things that I think INCOSE-Chesapeake specifically can action on. You know, so I for one would be very interested in partnering with you on things like you had mentioned there about the engaging with those particular industries and doing STEM stuff, or just bringing them to talk here at the chapter and stuff like that. So. Yeah, we are the chapter. If you look at I guess our membership, maybe Mark and I think earlier in the year we sort of looked at some numbers trying to see like what industries, you know, what's the distribution of industries in the chapter, and it's kind of hard to divine because that just the way that type of information is captured by the chapter, but we are, as you'd expect, heavily aerospace. DOD, this particular chapter, the intel industry, but definitely government heavy industries, service industries.
I also say that means IT, you know, rather than just big airplanes and tanks and all that kind of stuff. It really focuses on a lot of the IT and all the challenges there on IT. And I think that cuts across almost all industries. Yeah. They may have little IT or big IT, but fundamentally they have the same challenges on some of that stuff. You know, understanding it, the data, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to build stuff? What makes sense? You know, all that kind of stuff is still common, I think.
And you know, what's interesting.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Jeff. I think what's interesting to me is how Mike Pafford's facilitation talk can impact both the culture talk and this talk, precisely what Jeff said. If you're bringing in agriculture, but you're ignoring the transportation or the other aspects that make agriculture come into play, and we already do all that. It just happened organically or what, but now people are trying to bring more technology in it, and these vertical farms are a totally new concept. So that's where the drones will start coming into play and stuff. So facilitating, so that's where, again, bringing back Mike's thing, can we facilitate the various people in charge to make sure that everybody's concerns are taken into account. So,
and don't forget the Internet of Things. All these things have things, right? And all the assurance and trust and all the things that go that we all have dealt with or are starting to deal with now, I think applies to all these industries.
So, Joe, hopefully we're system thinking here as we're working through it. Mm-hmm. As we're working through this.
Yeah, this is Jeff again. I think many of us work in the defense contractor community where this is an easier issue because the government can set standards. The government can require departments to have a CIO and an enterprise architecture team, and actually can require you know, systems engineering. In fact, right now, digital engineering is being pushed on many of the ACAT-1 programs in the DoD and Intel communities. I don't know that, you know, in the rest of the major sectors of our economy, there's anything that could be so forceful, right? That can have such an influence. And if you try to grow it sort of bottoms up, then you're, you know, depending on individuals or individual companies, or, you know, just, you know, more private sector cooperation, and private sector companies like to compete, not necessarily cooperate.
Yeah, I have to agree, Jeff. I mean, if you can't, except from the top down, like if you're worried about resilience, like you want to make sure if something happens in your agricultural sector, you'll still have food available. Individual companies aren't worried about that. They're like, I'm just getting food out. What the heck are you talking about? You're right. It has to come from the top down in order to try to encourage the resilience being designed in, not bolted on, which you can't do anyway with resilience. So it's those type of systems thinking that we need to help facilitate and work through. Yeah.
Great point, Paul. Great point.
Hey, that's 5 minutes for Dr. Winchester. Let me wrap up here, and then we can have further discussion after I give away this neat system in a cup. So Dave, if you can bring...
delivery system in a cup.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Caffeine
That's right.
delivery.
Caffeine
right.
system delivery in a cup.
Keep it right. Okay.
So all these cool presentations are actually currently on our YouTube channel. And you'll be able to, if you go there and look for the playlist MiniTalks, you'll be able to rewatch these and probably see the slides in better detail.
And I'll try to fix Woodrow's sync problem. She's sorry about that. Sorry, Woodrow. We'll fix it in post. Here we go.
Where's Dave with our wheel? Dave Aldridge. There it is. Okay.
Hey, there we go. The wheel is spinning now, and
yeah. So basically, anybody who was a speaker is sort of disqualified from the thing.
Wait, hold on. That was not correct. I'm sorry. Let me. I need to reshare my screen.
Oh, okay.
I need to reshare it. That for some reason I got the wrong window. Hold on just a minute here.
Oh, you got multiple wheels up?
Yeah, somehow it did an old wheel rather than the one that I just set up. So let me share again, and let's see if
you have all 22 of us here. I think we had 23 at one point. We're down to 19.
Yeah, we had. Yeah, he can put them all in. We'll reach out to people with the emails they registered with. So.
Okay, are you seeing it now?
Looks very similar to.
Yeah, except different people. See, there was an old.
Yeah.
There we go.
There it goes. It's spinning wildly.
Yep. These are the people, and the winner is Kathy DeVito.
Yes, Kathy.
Congratulations, Kathy.
There she is.
Congratulations, Kathy.
You can say hi, Kathy.
Thank you very much. I don't win anything, so this is quite the surprise.
Okay.
And please treat the cup carefully. There are very few left. Yeah.
It's pretty sturdy. There are very few left. This is the last of the lineage.
You could actually hurt somebody with that.
You could. It's heavy. Yeah. So I'll use the email you registered with, Kathy, and reach out to you and get your mailing address. All right. At this point, at this point, if people have further questions for our speakers or want to chat about anything else, feel free to.
Hey, Clinton, don't forget to let everybody know they can save the chat.
Yes.
That we will save the chat, or
they
what?
Can save the chat.
They can.
Oh, actually, people. Oh, I see what you're saying. Anybody can save the chat if you want to save the conversation yourself. I think we typically do that too. I'm not sure how that gets. I'm not sure if that often goes with the after action report. Usually
it doesn't. No, I don't.
Yeah.
I do find sometimes I pull out some of the links if people give me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Jeff. I have a question for Ahmed. I really enjoyed the presentation. I had a question about a different issue, but related issue. You focused on the cultural differences and focused on theology and ethics and religion. How about socioeconomic? Have you studied this and tried to research, how valuable systems engineering is to, let's say, third world countries, or even companies that are in financial distress, or startup companies that are, not necessarily flush with cash and having to maybe cut corners? Have you looked at that, or is there any research on that you're aware of?
Actually, I don't know about the social economics in general. I don't have background on it, but maybe reaching this topic was like a PhD journey for me, because in the beginning I was trying to investigate multidisciplinary optimization for aerospace systems. Then I was working as a systems engineer here in Saudi Arabia. Then I found a lot of literature about model-based system engineering. So I thought that our problem is not multidisciplinary optimization. Our problem could be solved by model-based system engineering. But after 1.5 years of research, I discovered that our problem is not model-based system engineering, is how we are culturally dealing with systems engineering. Then I found that paper which enlightened me about systems engineering in China. And I said, yes, those are different culture, different than American culture, and they are applying systems engineering tailored to their own culture. So I said, what are my cultural roots? How can I tailor systems engineering to fit my own culture? So I'm just starting this research. I didn't reach a conclusion. Okay. Because it's very critical. If you talk about Islam, you need to come back to the interpretation, and you need to make sure that you are interpreting Islamic principles correctly.
Okay, I appreciate that. I just follow-up question: will you try to remove the economic aspect then from your research, because Islamic countries are very wealthy, as the same with Western countries? Are you leaving that out of your research and your potential findings? Because I think there may be some combinations between economics and cultural factors in the adoption or acceptance of systems engineering.
Yes, of course. Actually, I discovered that systems engineering have around 30 processes. And if I include all of the processes of system engineering in my research, I will not finish. So I need to narrow down my research to either 1 or 2 processes, or I'm still thinking about it. But also Islam have a lot of interpretation about the Islamic economics, and Islamic economics and Islamic finance is a very big subject, but I'm not knowledgeable of it.
Okay, thank you.
That was very good. I want to ask a question with actually with Mike. After you heard what Ahmed said about culture, is there an aspect in facilitation? Do you see where understanding the culture and where you're at, does that impact the way facilitation, and does your organization look in, take that into account, or are they taking it into account?
Well, let me just say right away that Ahmed would know this, and I think all of you all would know that, and you'll certainly discover the same thing I discovered. IAF, the International Association of Facilitators, is the most diverse international organization I've ever come in contact with. It is they're very strong facilitators in South Asia, in Europe, and the Southeast Asia, and larger Asia continent, and so on, in Australia, and so on. It is a really a wonderful window into how professionals, I'll just say how professionals are using different methodologies in the area of facilitation. It's a wonderfully diverse international organization, and the cultures are just, it's just wonderful to be part of these meetings, and of course you can imagine the workshops where the natural cultures are on display, and just the best practices doesn't really even say it. If you can imagine what I'm saying here, if you can imagine best practices with best aspects of all the different cultures overlaid with that, nice. You can imagine what a great experience it is to be part of this organization.
That's great. Thanks. Yeah, that's perfect.
Now, one of the things I wanted to, along those lines, an insight I wanted to maybe try to pass on is lean thinking versus design thinking versus systems thinking, and how culture affects those, versus lean engineering, design engineering, and systems engineering, and how business culture affects those more. So I think the how you are raised in your culture affects the way you think, but I think the engineering part of it cannot help but be possibly as much or more influenced by business culture. So I think the ethnoculture, as far as thinking is concerned, and the business culture, as far as engineering is concerned, may need to be reconciled.
I think when you talk, it's interesting to me, and Woodrow would know this, I've been teaching systems engineering, but I think we have our own culture because of what INCOSE put together. They put together the standard. We're trying to think the same and all that. But I do believe we're woefully, from a systems thinking standpoint, is where we're probably not as strong as we should be, considering we're system engineers. So it's interesting you bring the thinking to these engineering things. Shouldn't they already be melded? But they're not. I really believe they've been separated out, or just not as emphasized as they should be. And
it's like one of my old basketball coaches used to say, you can't coach height. You can coach height, but you can't coach height. So how we think is how we grow up.
Right.
How we engineer is
what we're taught
after we get into the workforce.
But I'm kind of hoping to bring the thinking aspect back in. And I think you realize this with facilitation, right? You're trying to get people to think outside the box, or outside their comfort zone, or even outside their cultural expectations. So thinking and trying to encourage people to think in that way. Woodrow, I don't think I told you this, but I am trying to come up with another UMBC course that would emphasize the thinking aspect of system engineering. So anyway.
Imagine the value of the systems engineers and the soft skill of facilitation when you encourage people to think as widely as possible.
Yeah.
Somebody has to have the responsibility of bringing and capturing that thinking into the engineering process. And so that's many times the systems engineer is called on to do that. And I know I have many times. So the challenge is to bring the broad thinking into the actionable engineering. And I think systems engineers getting good at the soft skill of facilitation are probably the best suited to try to do that.
And the handbook alludes to it. I agree with you. The handbook doesn't like hit you over the head with it, but you read it, you're like, we're there trying to get all the domains together so that we can produce this system. So it is there, but not explicit. Interesting.
And
Yeah,
just
good
one last
point,
thing
Mike.
I'll say is Sean McCoy is right now, as we're speaking, holding their monthly soft skills working group meeting on Zoom. And I had to do the regrets and say, that's just the way it goes. You have to be two places at once. But I most certainly would refer everybody to Sean McCoy and the soft skills working group that he's just started.
Okay. Yeah, send us that link. I'll put it into the after action report. Just put it in the chat for us.
Okay. Well, actually, it's just the INCOSE Connect working groups soft skills. That's what it is. And their charter will come up, as you know, and all the information. And they're one of the newer working groups.
Great.
John McCoy is leading that.
Paul, I had a few comments for Ahmed when you have a chance. Hi, Ahmed, George Anderson. I spent a year in Saudi Arabia a long time ago. And I have a few comments on your presentation. One is I think that you've got a great beginning on what's going to be a very long story. And that what is not understood by the folks here practicing Western type of systems engineering is a lot of the factors of your culture that get into the real hard subjects. And one of my surprises was when I saw a student who was probably in some level of high school doing two math problems side by side. One was basically, I see you smiling, you know what I'm saying, don't you? One was doing, based on, Pythagoras and Greek proofs for geometry. And the other was based on an Islamic mathematician who probably lived, maybe in the 5th century or so. And it opened my eyes to the fact that there are other ways to get the same answer, because when he came down and showed me his calculations, right, they reached the same answer. And that was his assignment, just to show that both systems work. So I'm just taking a little time to pass on that experience to say that I think that's the area where you're going to be able to contrast the role of the system engineer and in those kinds of situations. Have to be prepared for not just different thinking, but different methodologies in the basic sciences. And these should not be ignored. And of course, I did not see many other examples of this, but I did want to point that out. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, George. Actually, I said to Mr. Clinton that this is a first presentation for me in front of Western experts in systems engineering. So it's very important for me to know, is the topic publishable? Is the topic feel interested to the Western community, or I should change it?
Well,
all good.
I'll chime in. I think it's very relevant. I think we have to be. I think we're too into ourselves in terms of our profession.
Come back in 6 months. We want to hear the rest of the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Keep us up to date on your research. We're happy to see how it goes.
Yeah.
And Iman, I think sprinkling like examples, like George talked about the math problem. There's two ways. Like I'd be real interested in saying, like, hey, if you read the INCOSE handbook and do these things, and this is how Western tends to do it, or how they think or organize it or structure it, but do the formulation of a culture of Islamic, this is how we would do it in there. It would be interesting to see, some examples, if you can find something like that, because it's hard for us to envision it until we hear and see it, kind of stuff on that. So I think there's a lot of good stuff you could probably do there on that as well.
Yes. One of the latest things which I found during my reading of Quran is that in Islamic theology, it's like it's not prohibited, but similar to prohibited, almost prohibited to ask for promotion. So in Islamic understanding, the leaders need to give you the promotion. So not you asking for promotion.
Interesting.
So this is just one example.
Yeah, like one example I had was in work when I've heard this, and I don't know if I worked a little bit. I worked this was in some of the Asian culture. They won't disagree with you in public. You know, in a big meeting, you think everything's fine, everything's good, but you go out of that and you find out that they don't agree. You know, you expect you had agreement. So that's a cultural thing, you know, based on how they're doing that, and it's really fundamental. It changes things a lot, you know. I mean, those are real practical things. An example that people have found out over the years, just on how their culture was too. So I'm guessing there's probably, you know, things like that in the Islamic world as well.
Yeah, and correct. The thing in Islamic theology, it's like giving you a manual, not just for the hereafter, but also for the life. So a full manual proven from the God himself to Prophet Muhammad until reaching. But the main challenge is the interpretation. Because of that, I couldn't give you a full example of decision making in Islam, because I'm still trying to build the methodology to guarantee that I'm interpreting the Allah saying correctly, not just copying the Western methodology or giving wrong interpretation.
Yeah. Hey, let me ask you, since I did the risk, how does Islamic, how do they view risk? Do they view it the same way we do, or differently?
Yeah, risk is a very important subject. You need to treat them realistically. So if I remember the saying of Prophet Muhammad, the ayah of Quran, how to deal with the risks, and maybe the major risk which the humanity find is that after they pass away, will they go to the hellfire or will they go to the paradise? So the whole purpose of Islam is to guide the people of this very important risk.
This is Jeff. I had a question for Mike Pafford. At the IS event last week, there was a discussion about an SE tools database that's being launched, 113 vendors, 348 tools. Do you know if there are any tools or aids or playbooks that are focused on you know, the topic you presented tonight? Would that be something that we would find in the newly published or newly released SE tools database from INCOSE-CC?
That's good. One of the things I can take on, is I'll investigate the tools and methodology library that IAF has, and I think there probably would be some tools that folks have been using. The tools that folks have been using that I might want to talk to the systems engineering tool base about. One is a business model canvas in the lean canvas. That's a very important tool that facilitators use, and program management and project management uses the business model and the lean canvas type tools. And so I guess I need to find out if the systems engineering tool base is looked at tools like that. But I guess the bottom line answer is I'm fairly confident there are probably IAF tools that one, systems engineers would recognize and be able to use without any problem, and then two, might be candidates for bringing to the attention of the tools database. So I'll go ahead and take that on, and I'll see how it goes. It might even be it might even result in something that might be worth bringing back to the chapter, but I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Mike, one interesting presentation as always. A lot of times, thinking facilitation, a lot of times in our SE position, certainly in the West, we may be called to do some facilitation, but you need cooperation from others in order to facilitate, right? If people don't want to cooperate, then it kind of like, you know, you can't be effective in doing it. Are there some assumptions or some preconditions before you go facilitate that your group is kind of, you know, talking about in order to make it effective?
Well, one of the first things that you'll find about the IAF, and even on Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn, if you follow it on those three social media, you'll find that they are very big on it. The very first thing you do is to try to get that cooperation through. I guess I'll just use a term that we know about called team building, even though it's very small scale. Most facilitators, when they go to facilitate a session, the very first thing they'll do is a purposeful exercise to bring everybody, to break the ice, I guess you would call it, and bring people together and to get that cooperation that's going to be required, and collaboration is going to be required for the rest of the session to do whatever it is they were brought together to do. So part of the methodology library, the initial part of the methodology library, and not by any means a trivial part of the methodology library, are these different exercises which are time bound. You know, a lot of things are time bound. They're time bound to actually try to gauge this level of gauge the level of cooperation, and to try to maximize the level of cooperation very much up front in almost every session. So that's a very important part of IAF, is this initial gain cooperation methodologies.
And do they say if you can't get a certain level, you just don't, that's a group you can't really do business with?
Well, actually the group discovers that. The group has to agree to facilitation. The group says, we have a problem, we have an issue, we have a decision, we have an objective, we have a deadline, we have something we need to do as a group, and we need to work on it. So we need to have somebody else come in and facilitate this thing to where we can all keep working, keep our heads down and all this kind of stuff. We need somebody else to pay attention to the agenda, pay attention to the externals, and make sure that everybody is contributing, because they won't naturally contribute and they won't naturally let everybody contribute. But that's why you agree to a facilitator, and you say, okay, that facilitator will make sure that the maximum amount of cooperation. So you agree to the facilitation, and then the group will say, okay, nice try. We're just too siloed, or we're too whatever. Or the group will say, that's why we have a facilitator.
Thanks.
Woodrow, if he's not indisposed there. Woodrow, are you still with us?
I'm here. I'm here.
Okay. Hide the lettuce.
I know exactly. Salad, Tom.
Hey, I want to thank all the speakers and event participants tonight. This is why INCOSE-CC wins Platinum Awards, because its members are doers, you know, not just at IAS, but within the chapter. And I really just want to thank all you speakers for stepping up and helping make this successful event.
I think it's also appropriate to thank Mark Evans for you know, leading us through the exciting events that allowed us to win the award.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No doubt. I just was thinking you know, tonight's event here, but yes, for the Platinum Award, it wasn't. This had nothing to do with it. That was, but this was more like anecdotal evidence that what you know, INCOSE-CC Chesapeake seems to be able to.
Of course, it's appropriate to give a shout to Mark. He's here tonight.
Yes,
Well,
sir.
thanks, George. But
That is right.
Thanks, George. But it's a big team effort, and you know, as Jeff said, it was 6 in a row. So we've got quite a string going now.
Yeah, but
it's almost the pressure is on the president because now you know you don't want to be the president that breaks the string.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a lot of sleepless nights, and I think you know it deserves a special thanks.
Hey, Emma, I saw your note. It's 3 a.m. where you are. Hey, thanks for losing sleep over this because that's it's tough to stay up that late.
I'm taking holiday tomorrow, so no problem.
I don't know you guys, but I thought this was pretty cool. I know I sat and talked with Clinton in the programs committee. I mean, we suggested to do something like this for a while, and I don't know you guys. I think it's pretty cool, you know, to be able to do this kind of stuff. So
it's a neat way to, I think, keep the interest up and then move through all these different topics is really, really good. So,
and I like the fact we can meld, you know, facilitation versus culture, risk versus, you know, it's good.